It's Aaron, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about a personal story that happened to me over the weekend. Now, that's not something I usually do on this channel. I don't usually have personal stories, but I figured that this video series is about doing things a little bit differently, so we're going to do that today. And this story starts off with me doing something that I don't usually do, and that was sitting in a bar. Now, I don't usually find myself sitting in bars because, well, I don't really drink. It's not something that I enjoy doing. It's just not my thing. I don't care if anybody else drinks, obviously. I'm an anarchist. You can do whatever you want so long as you're not hurting anybody else. But me personally, I metabolize alcohol very quickly, and I feel that even 15 minutes after I have the first beer, I start to feel a little bit hungover. I'm getting too old for this shit. I just can't do it anymore. Once in a while, I'll have a glass of gin. Gin seems to be fine for me, but outside of that, I don't really drink. But I do smoke legal marijuana. Now, I feel obligated to tell you all that because when people find out that you don't need to inebriate yourself with alcohol or in some way to escape this hellscape that we currently live in, then you're somehow weird. So don't worry, yes, I do inebriate myself. Everybody has to in some way. If it's not through some sort of drug or alcohol, it's probably through a narcissistic behavior or studying too much. Both of those I do as well. And but I found myself in a bar without a drink in my hand. And obviously, when you are in a situation where you're at a bar without a drink in your hand, looking the way that I do, in a conservative area with dreadlocks and probably a black leather jacket on, you start gaining a bit of attention. And obviously this was no different from any other time. A group of people sitting across from me at the other table, who had been eyeing me up for the last hour or so, had finally had enough drinks in their system that one of them decided to come over and start a conversation with me. Now, it wasn't so much a conversation as much as it was more or less a confrontation, but it was an interesting conversation nonetheless, and I was able to turn it around and make it into at least a benefit to both of us rather than getting into some sort of fight, I guess, which is what the person wanted. Now, this person that came up to me, though, had a bit of an interesting dilemma. They were physically disabled, like severely. They were missing all of the fingers on both of their hands and only had about 3 fingers on each hand. Of course, this didn't stop them from being amazing at what they did. Their profession was professional chef, and professional is just the least of what you could say about them. They're probably one of the greatest chefs I've ever seen, and they got that way because they had to always fight and always strive to be better than everyone else, because he had that physical disability. It made him want to fight harder and to try harder than everyone else. And of course, with that mentality and the fact that he did have to go through life with this physical disability, born with this disability, they were wondering why I would choose to dress myself in the way that I do. Obviously, I don't look like a normal person, but if I was to shave off the dreadlocks and I wasn't to wear the leather jackets and talk about the weird things that I do, maybe get rid of the tunnels, hand tattoos, that sort of thing, I would just be a regular white guy that, you know, probably has a lot of privilege and would never get discriminated against for really anything, aside from being white. Now, this person, obviously, didn't understand why I wouldn't want to do that. They themselves wanted their entire lives to just be normal, to just be a regular person. And seeing me, some guy that they probably think is a hoity-toity liberal with his funny-looking hair and the fact that he's sitting at a bar without a fucking drink, he's probably thinking to himself, hey, this asshole's trying to be fucking better than me, and at the same time, he's trying to play up this identity politics bullshit, trying to make himself look like he's, I don't know, in some sort of class that's oppressed, so they can get woke points or whatever it is. I never think about those things that way. I usually just present myself the way that I feel on the inside. The way that I look on the outside is the way that I want to look because that's how I feel inside my soul. The same reason why basically anybody dresses the way that they want to dress in the first place. I just don't feel any shame about it. I'm not afraid to go out there looking any way that I personally want to because, well, partly because I'm an anarchist and I don't give a fuck what the majority of society thinks about the way that I look. It's my decision. It's my body. I can do with it what I want so long as I'm not hurting anybody else. But it did raise a bit of an interesting complication. They themselves thought that I was just doing this for attention, very similarly to their nephew that wanted to get gender transition therapy. Now, like I said, I preface this with saying that I live in a conservative area. This person that I was talking to, regardless of them being disabled, they were lumpen proletariat. They were a very conservative person that was fed conservative propaganda from my conservative area their entire lives. So they didn't think that gender transition therapy was normal or natural or something that anybody should go through. They thought it was weird. But they also were kind of libertarian in the fact that they didn't think that anybody should really have a problem with those sorts of things so long as you don't have to pay for it with your taxes. So they said to me, you know what? My niece wants to be my nephew. Or my nephew wants to be my niece. I don't remember exactly how it was. And I think that that's bullshit that I have to pay for that through my taxpayer dollars. When I go to the fucking registry, when I go to the government and ask them for help with my physical disabilities, they basically kick me out on my ass and tell me to go fuck myself. Why is it that I have to pay for this gender transition therapy through my taxes while I don't get any of the benefits back? And I couldn't answer him that question. I couldn't tell him why his taxpayer dollars would be going to one thing and not the other because, well, nobody knows why the taxpayer dollars go to one thing and not the other. You see, I had to explain to him, in our system, 90% of all legislation that's passed has absolutely zero to do with anything that the voters actually want. It has to do with what the big moneyed interests want. It has to do with what the big businesses want to have happen. You're just a side note. You really don't matter at all to them. And if they want to fund certain things and not fund others, it's their prerogative. Taxes, and I said this to him, taxes are a situation where you are paying money and not getting any kind of printed receipt afterwards that tells you where that money went. Actually, taxes are one of the only things in your world, in life, where it actually works that way, where you make a financial transaction that you don't actually have any idea on what you paid for. You have to just take it at face value. You have to just take the politician's word for it that they're spending that money on things like people that are disabled or on infrastructure and not just lining their fucking pockets with it. There's no way to know where those taxes are going. So, and obviously this person, who I said was more conservative but leaned a little bit more libertarian, they said to themselves, yeah, that makes total sense. You're right. Taxes, I have no idea where they're going. But what are you trying to say? I said, well, if you already don't believe that taxes are going where you think that they're going, why are you upset at your niece that wants to become your nephew? They want to go through this gender transition when you don't even know if your taxpayer dollars are actually going to funding them. You have no idea where that money is going. Why are you getting mad at your niece when the person that you should be getting mad at, the thing that you should be getting mad at, is the system that is set up like this to make you constantly have to either pay for something that you don't want or vote for some guy that you don't want to vote in? Why would you have to be in that situation? And he said, I never thought about it that way. I never thought that, taxes really don't make any fucking sense at all in the way that we have them right now. So why would I be getting mad at my niece for something that I have absolutely no problem with? If she wants to become a man or he wants to become a female, that's up to them. It's none of my business. And I said, exactly. Why would you want to fight your niece? You love your niece. You think your niece is the best person in the world, don't you? And he said, absolutely I do. I fucking love my niece. I never wanted to fight with her in the first place. I want to hug her. I want to give her a great big fucking hug. And I said, exactly. You don't care if they want to do something that doesn't affect you, that only would make them happy. You don't care about that. You care that you have to pay for it with your taxes, and it's something that you ideologically disagree with. But why do you have to do that in the first place? Why is it that you have to vote for a politician to make a decision for you when you could just make those decisions yourself? And he kind of stepped back a little bit and said, I never really thought about it that way. I said, exactly. Why is it that we need to have these corrupt, bastard-ass politicians that are going to make decisions that inherently don't work for everybody when we could just be making those decisions on a Friday on our fucking cell phone on an app that we all had, a democracy app? Or you hire some guy that knows a lot about politics and he makes those decisions on your behalf. And if he does something that you don't like, you can immediately fire his ass instead of having to wait for an election cycle to finally change him out for another corrupt, empty fucking business suit that's going to make more decisions that affect you in a negative way. 90% of all legislation that's passed has nothing to do with what the people want. It all has to do with what the big money donors want, what the big interests want. And in a situation where you are in, my friend, this gentleman that was missing his fingers, who knows better than you about how your medical treatment should be going? Why is it that you have to worry about how this one politician is going to spend your money, if he's going to spend it on gender transition therapy, or he's going to spend it on disability, on your disability? Who knows better about that situation than you? I mean, every politician in the world could spend their entire lives learning and studying and trying to understand every aspect of how your life is, of how your disability works. They can try to know all of the forms that you have to go through. They can try to know all of the different medications and things that you need, but they're never going to know that. They're never going to really understand what you're going through. The only person that's going to know is you. So who better to make the decisions about the healthcare system than a person that has to deal with it every single day? Not because they want to, but because they have to. Why would you have to sit in a situation where some bureaucrat, some businessman, some fucking empty suit 100 miles away makes all of the decisions that affect your immediate life, instead of having those decisions made by the people that those lives are being affected? This is why the system is so broken in the way that it is. This is why we need to have a complete change of the way we do things. Because the way that we're going about things is we're constantly focusing on the situations as though they are the way that they are, and they had no beginning, and there will be no end. We only have to focus on how we can solve the symptoms instead of actually solving the real problems. And that's not a situation where any of us need to be in. That's a situation that's just going to make things worse. It's just going to make everybody's lives horrible. And at the end of the conversation, I have to say, it was kind of exciting because he kind of stood up and said to me, you know what? I fucking agree with every goddamn thing that you're saying. And I told him that I'm a leftist. I'm not a liberal. I don't believe in liberalism. And that made him happy. He didn't believe in liberalism either. In fact, he fucking hated liberals because he was a conservative. And I said to him, but I am a leftist. And that's how leftists think about things. We don't think that we should be constantly fighting between this politician or that politician. We don't need those fucking idiots. We don't need those guys. We can make decisions on our own. We can come to conclusions about situations by having discussions with each other. That's how we should be able to solve these problems. Not by electing some empty suit, by actually talking to one another, and by actually hashing these things out, and by making decisions that actually affect our personal lives. And he smiled and he said, you know what? When are you going to go out next time? Because I'm going to come with you. And I think that we might want to go storm the government together. Now, of course, he was a little bit drunk, and I don't think that that's necessarily going to happen right away. But the fire is out there. People's bellies are fucking burning for a change. And even though a lot of people, a lot of these lumpen proletariat, these people that don't understand what the real problems are, even though they're out there and they're mad, it's not going to take much to get them on the side of the good. It's not going to take very much to get them to actually change their minds about these things and push them over that edge. Most people are already in the position where they don't think that the government or that the politicians are going to help them at all. So all they need is that one little extra push to get them on our side. And it doesn't take much. It just means redirecting that energy from their family and their friends to the system and the elites. At least that's the way I look at it. If you do get a chance, please check out my Patreon. Every dollar does help fund this show. And by the way, I'm so sorry about the wind. It's literally the most gentle breeze you could possibly imagine, and every single little bit of it is getting picked up by my audio right now, and it's driving me fucking nuts. So I'm very sorry about that. I'm filming on my fucking cell phone here. Anyway, thanks for watching. Have a good day.